customer-centric networks. On the chat this morning, we have Ms. Cristine Korowajczuk, Vice President of Technical Sales at Celplan. Celplan is a member of CANTO that specializes in wireless, and wireline networks. I want to say thank you to our audience for joining us this morning and to remind you to mute all microphones and post your questions for Cristine in the chat. Cristine, I hope I got your last name correct. Welcome to CANTO Conversations. We're very, very excited to have you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you very much for the introduction, for being the moderator today. As she said, I'm the VP of Technical Sales for Celplan. Celplan is a company, just to give you a little background, that we've been working for over 20 years with the wireless industry and trying to help carriers and any other company that needs wireless networks to make them work the best way possible. Because of that, one very important thing for us is analyzing and understanding customer experience. So without further ado, I'm going to start our presentation and cover what we think about customer experience and how we think that can help people.
Sure.
So first thing is, in the times that we're facing nowadays, with all the restrictions that were put in place to regular work or our normal work because of COVID, a lot of people had to shift the way they work, where they work, and how they work. So a lot of that force people to go and work from home offices. So what happens is now you have, before you had a few people that needed to be at home and do and use computers throughout the day. Now you have pretty much everybody at home, and they need to do video conferences. They need to be learning. So they have kids at school that are remote learning. They need to be doing voice over IP, VPN. They need to access remote desktop applications because they still have their computers in the office that a lot of time you can't just download that data and bring it home. So more than ever, that became very important, that you now have a network that can be reliable, that can provide you that type of service, especially because several of the services, they cannot tolerate big latency. They're more demanding than just checking the occasional email. Another interesting thing is that, think about where your office is. So when the networks are designed, a lot of time they're planning for all the traffic to be located at a certain place during the day. Everybody go to the office, everybody goes downtown. Now, all of a sudden, that traffic during the day, it's where people live because everybody's at home. So this needs to be addressed, and you need to really think of your user experience when you're designing and optimizing your network. One thing that we notice is that traditional methods to analyze user experience or to analyze the network are not good to determine user experience. And why is that? The main reason for that is the different types of networks we have today. When you have a network like a 2G network, for example, GSM network, you have a dropped call, or you try to make a call, you can't make a call. So you know, my user won't be happy because they cannot make a call. But how about now? Now you can still get online. You cannot tell just by looking at drive test and looking at OSS data if the information that your network is, it looks like it's busy and the information is going back and forth, up and downstream, but you cannot just by looking at that data. Yes, there is traffic at my network. You can't understand what the customer is feeling, because the customer may be frustrated because he's trying to watch a video and that video keeps stopping to create a buffer. Or he's in the middle of a conference call, like his most important conference call of the day, and then all of a sudden his, the image is not there, or people can't hear him, or he just completely loses the connection and then keeps trying to reconnect. So that information doesn't mean that the data stopped. the data is just much slower. Why? Because of something that is built in modern technologies, which is a natural throttling of data that the technologies do. So this is what can't be determined, it can't be assessed by just doing drive tests and analyzing OSS data. So we decided that, you know what, the problem here is that people need to figure out how to measure this customer experience. And that's how the network optimization, the whole network should be optimized. And which is why we thought this was such a relevant topic now for, you know, during COVID, because more than ever, you really need to make sure when you're optimizing, you have this user experience in mind, the customer experience in mind. So I think the first thing that we need to understand here is what affects user experience. So what do you need to know? So we came down to like 4 main pillars that affect this user experience. So first is you need to remember that the internet connection may always exist. So you're always connected, it's there, but it will adjust the traffic, its capability to the offered traffic to the capacity of the network. So the network has a limited capacity, and users want to use more and more and more and more data. So how many times, you know, you're fine, you're having a conference call, and then your child decides that they're going to watch TV, and then the other one is playing live computer gaming, and then something else happens and you're transferring data, and then all of a sudden somebody's not happy, and then another person's not happy, or you're sharing bandwidth with your neighbors because you're not the only one using that internet connection, especially when we're talking about wireless. So all this gets very complicated. Another thing, there's a big difference between what is we called Goodput and what is the throughput. So when you measure throughput, or when mostly everybody, and we have a better slide about that with more detail, measures throughput, the idea of throughput measure is you send packets on the network and you try to increase the size of the packet bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you fit the biggest packet that you can transmit on a network. And that's the packet that you're going to use to analyze the network speed. That's the throughput. However, when we're actually using the network, we're not using a big packet. Most of the stuff we do is in smaller packets. And that's what we call Goodput. The Goodput should look into how is the speed of the network when we're using smaller packets, okay? So what affects the Goodput? The applications being used. So one very important thing is that when you're analyzing that, you have to simulate the type of applications that you're going to have on your network. Another pillar that's important is that wireless technologies are self-healing. So what happens with that? The different types of modulation schemes that you can transmit, there's some that are very fast. You can transmit many symbols fast with quality and carrying data. But a lot of times, especially if you're in a position and a location where your quality is not very good, then you don't have enough signal to noise ratio to use a modulation scheme that transmits so fast. So you will trade that for not you're not making that choice. The network is self-adapting. So it's self-healing. It still wants to carry your data. But now what it's going to do, it's going to naturally throttle your traffic because it needs to add correction symbols. It needs to add extra information that will allow your data to still be correctly interpreted on the other end. Okay, so, and the last thing here is that traditional formulations are not effective in adding capacity. So one thing that we notice working with many different customers is that, it's sad to say this, but about 4 out of 5 sites deployed to increase network capacity, they don't have the desired effect, and sometimes they actually create more trouble. And why is that? So that's what we need to understand. Why can't I just, like, I have a capacity issue here, I'm going to stick another site, that site is going to solve my problem. Oops. Hold on, I skipped too fast there. So I already talked a little bit about this. Let's just go a little more detail here. So throughput, it's really what the people see when they see a speed test. So this has been, since internet became more and more prevalent, people started trying to figure out a way that they can measure the speed of internet. And the throughput or the speed tests were the first things that were developed. And they said, we got to come up with a means that everybody can measure it in a somewhat similar way. So that's what I was describing before. You get a packet, you transmit, and then you make it bigger, transmit, make it bigger, transmit. So when you're doing the speed test or running any speed test app, and you see like on the beginning, before it gives you the speed, it keeps doing something. What's that doing something? It's increasing the packet size to see what's the biggest packet size I can pass on this network. Then once it finds that size, okay, that's the biggest I can send in there. It sends the packet and receives the packet back. And I was like, okay, that's your speed. Now, I already said, when you're using, for example, you're talking on Skype, you're not sending big packets, you're sending little ones. So then that speed is no longer valid, because that's your immediate speed for sending one big packet. It's not your constant speed for sending a bunch of little packets and competing with other little packets that are getting in there. So there is no way to standardize this speed test. The way you will implement how you're going to assess this big packet, it changes from entity to entity. So that you could have the same network at different times. You could have different speed measuring, but depending on what speed test tool you're using. One, because the condition of the network changes from time A to time B, but also because they might be using slightly different measuring methods. So one thing that is important when we talk about Goodput is understand that anything you do in terms of user experience should not look into throughput. It should look into Goodput, because that's the actual experience that the user will be. That's their packet size. That's their mix of application being sent. So a big quick definition here of what Goodput, or what we can call another name, an application effective throughput. So that's the throughput, if you want to use the traditional name, but at application level. So that's the number of useful information bits delivered by the network to a destination per unit of times. So you need to get rid of overhead, repetition, error correction. So if the person is doing a transmission and he is in an area with very good quality. So let's say I have this transmission here, we're doing this webinar, and I have awesome quality. So my information is good. I'm happy. I can see my video, I can transmit my video, I can speak. Now imagine if somebody watching this webinar is in a location that is not as good quality, and every other word I say he misses, or the information is not very clear. It could be that he probably most likely won't be happy. But for the OSS data won't know that, because all the OSS data will see is traffic being carried. But a big part of the traffic being carried to the person is overheads, repetitions, error corrections, okay? So it's important to understand too that the application that you're using will define what Goodput is required for user satisfaction. So if I'm doing email, I may not have good quality, but it may not be a problem, because I may not even realize, I was like, oh, I should have gotten this email 30 seconds ago. I don't know. I wasn't expecting that email. So Goodput is definitely tied to application. So what we have here is just a study that we did. So we have a speed test that we did. So I'll get to CellPhone in a little bit. Let's just look at the other ones. Ookla, then I had Goodput Voice, Goodput Email, Goodput Video. So if you look at Ookla, that is traditional throughput speed test. So what did it do? It increased the packet size, right? And then when it got the big packet size, it sent that information through the network. Now, if you are doing voice application, your packet is not that big. If you're doing email, if you're doing video, so your expectation or your speed test, if you're using, so this is using the big packet size from Ookla. This is using a slightly smaller packet size from a video call. Notice how your speed test gets different speeds. Email, look at voice, your speed test for voice, because the packets are much smaller. So it's not good to assess user, let's even call it happiness or satisfaction, by the orange line, because that's not what they're using. They're using one of these or a combination of these. So that's why you have to be careful. So what we did here, we have an application, and I think I talk about it a little bit more in the next slide. CellPhone, it's like a crowdsourcing app that you can install on the phones. So what we did, just to confirm that this is really what Ookla was measuring, we programmed our application to transfer the largest packet possible using the cell phone. So we simulated that, and then we did an actual Goodput video package and an email packet and a voice packet, okay? So one thing that start before you even get into optimization here, the network design has issues it has to address differently when we're talking about the modern technologies. So for example, traditional network design, what would you do? A wireless network design. You use RF propagation models, but a lot of times these propagation models, even though you might be using a 3D database, they are not looking at the actual height of the obstructions. So they're not truly acting as a 3D model. Another thing you do is use a traditional traffic simulation method, such as Monte Carlo. So Monte Carlo was very good method. It is a very good method to do traffic simulation, but it was better suited for networks that can't throttle, that won't naturally throttle and self-heal. So for example, a GSM network. And then you use resource planning to minimize interference. So you would do frequency planning and channel reuse. And this is I'm going to do a reuse of 7 or ad hoc planning. And then you would do a footprint enhancement to further reduce interference. So I'm going to try to reduce my overlaps and minimize the interference of cells using the same code channels. What are the problems with this for modern networks? Well, first, you cannot consider self-healing. So you have to assume that there is a certain traffic load. So your sites are going to be operating at full capacity, maybe 20% of capacity, 30% of capacity. You have to make an assumption. Otherwise, you can't do a proper design. Then traffic simulation takes a very long time. Why is that? Because you can no longer just spread a few users and say, oh, this is where they're going to be placing calls. Because now you're not just doing calls. Can you imagine if you have to place like, oh, I have all these users, some are doing video, some are doing video and phone, some are doing video, voice of IP and email, some are doing, it would be a very long time to do a proper traffic simulation. And network self-healing properties are not considered. So when you're doing this type of design, you're not considering that, okay, now all these users in this region, they have poor quality. So they're being downgraded to, let's say, QPSK, which means that most of the transmission will be really overhead and error correction and not the actual data of the user. So it's not as simple to include all that on the plan. And because of that, it's harder to figure out where you should deploy additional sites, because you're just going to say like, oh, this site is loaded, I'm going to put another site here. Well, guess what? That site might have been loaded because there's so much interference on that area that those users are mostly transmitting error correction. Now you put another site reusing the same channel. You're adding interference even more. So as soon as you put that site is now overloaded. And the other two, guess what? They're still overloaded, because now all you're doing is distributing the interference amongst 3 sites rather than 2 sites. So a better solution might have been remove one of the sites and replace that site by something farther away, or lower the site. So there's other solutions that you might need to consider. So what would be a better 5th generation, let's call it that way, wireless design? So we address that. We call it CellExperience because it's a tool we developed to our customers to help with that. But it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, but it's the method that's important, what you need to consider. So for example, ideally a propagation model that accurately predicts 3D coverage. So I'm not talking about a ray tracing model where you need to have every single, of course, depending on the frequency band you're working with, you might have to go to that level. But I'm talking 3D, just actually a model that will make use of the detailed GIS data. Second, what we call the advanced integral traffic simulation. You don't want to look at one site and simulate that site. You don't want to place a few random calls. You want to simulate the network traffic as a whole, because anything you change on that traffic, it's a cascade effect through the whole network. So you have to make sure that when you're simulating the traffic, you simulate the whole network traffic. Third, consider network throttling. And I'm not talking carrier throttling anybody. I'm talking natural throttling. If the network doesn't have capacity, it will downgrade users to be able to send that information. That's part of the technology. And lastly, self-healing and self-interference. Like I said, you don't want to add a site and then increase the interference that you're trying to solve in the first place. So what are the advantages of doing this approach? First, you can now predict user experience. Second, and this is one of the important ones, you can truly detect the saturation points of your network. Third, you can locate where expansion cells are needed, and you can module future traffic increases. So what you can do is start your network, even if you haven't deployed it yet, based on the distribution of users. And then again, I go back to my first slide where I said, remember, before COVID, everybody during the day is working at their offices. Now they're working on the residential area. Your traffic pattern just shifted. So you can do that type of simulation, because as long as you know where that distribution is, so now you can use, let's say, census data with demographic to create a new traffic pattern for your network. And then you can increase that and figure out before it happens which cells are going to burst first. So you can address that before that happens. So here's just a nice chart I thought to add there, showing video streaming. So what we had is just continuous video streaming. And let's start, I think the best here to start with is the top line. So if you look in blue, I have a video, high definition video, so 1080p. And then in orange, I have 480p. Then gray is 240, then very low resolution in yellow. And then the purple would be your video auto adjusting for the best possible quality at any one time, okay? So remember what I said about Goodput. Goodput is the transmission of the packets the size you want them to be. So this is somebody watching YouTube. So this is the person watching YouTube on, at this point in time, high definition. So person is happy. He's a 5. I'm have my high definition video and I'm a 5. And then your Goodput starts dropping, right? So then when I get to this point, if I stick to watching high definition video, my user satisfaction starting to drop. My Goodput drops a little more, look, my user satisfaction is even worse. And then it gets worse and fairly fast because I'm stuck on that high definition video, right? If I were, on the other hand, watching a very low 144p definition video. So I don't know, let's say just a silly meme I'm watching on the internet. I'm good. The Goodput can fall, and it doesn't matter because I can still carry the data I want to see. So look how different the perspective is of the network dropping capacity from this user. I can guarantee you right here, he's not happy at all. This user, he's still as happy as a clam. Not a problem. So it's important to understand that Goodput is really tied in with what people are doing, with what application they're using. So the purple line here, basically what is representing is a video that would adjust to the best image you can see available at any one point. So it wouldn't get stuck on the high definition. It would just drop the quality of the video lower definition, but always trying to do a compromise of the best quality that you can watch while with the Goodput of the network. So you just get frustrated, not as bad as the high definition guy, but you are slowly getting here a little frustrated. So if the scoring, just if you want here, so 5 would be a perfect, 3 would be acceptable, but with a few breaks, it lags a little bit. The 2 would be long lagging time, and then I just learned that word with my son, so I'm very proud of the video lag word. Yeah, because Mom, the video is lagging, and I was like, oh, okay. So he's usually on a 2, and he's not happy at all. So that's why it's important to think of that. Okay, so how do you improve network capacity with end user experience? So first thing is that you have to think that there's a disconnection today between network performance reports and user experience. So you have to really separate those two things. They're two independent things, and they should be analyzed differently. I'm not telling you don't analyze network performance reports. I'm just telling you they do not reflect what your user sees. So we already talked about some of these points. I'm just addressing the ones I haven't talked about yet. So for example, the most recent techniques that talk about user satisfaction, they don't tackle the behavioral issues of the data networks. So it's important that you understand that the adaptive characteristic of the data protocols and the new wireless technologies, 4G, 5G that we use today, you really need to understand that before you can try to optimize your network. So the way we figure out how to do this, it was to always look into the perspective of the user in terms of when am I getting frustrated? Because that's telling you that your network is now carrying more overhead and error correction than actual user data. So here, just using our two to give an example, and then I did 2 slides, so I'll go from this one to this one. So because this is easier to explain, and then I'll show a more a real life scenario, right? So here is, we made a very well-behaved, oops, sorry about that, a very well-behaved model of a network. So sites are equally spaced, they all have the same characteristics, and I have uniform traffic. So on green here, I have very traffic factor 0%. So, and the green means my user 100% or pretty close to 100% satisfied, because I have very low traffic, no factor, no traffic at all, just the minimum that I need to transmit on the network. Then I put 50% of traffic. So now what I did is I'm loading my cells to 50% of their capacity. So what starts happening is that if I'm using LTE, I start having some resource block issues now in areas where 2 cells are overlapping and they're 50% used. So you start going to have some conflict. So you start having some quality drops, and hence you might start having to send some error correction. So then what happens is, now you see, notice you have yellows here, and then you start having oranges. Then I increased the traffic to 100%. So now I increased my traffic that was working well here, 100%. So I doubled my initial traffic, right? So now notice that I still have some areas that perform really well, but I have some areas where I pretty much lost I have nothing more. I cannot carry actual data. I'm carrying overhead. That's all I'm carrying, error correction. And then when I start even increasing my traffic even more, you see that it's a cascade effect. So here's the same thing, but looking at a real network. So here's where the initial traffic layout that I had for the area. So I didn't increase the traffic. I designed my network for that traffic. And look, it's very good. It's carrying everything. Then I said, okay, I'm going to increase that traffic in a factor of 50%. And now I already start seeing where the cells are going to start like, ooh, I might have a problem here. And then I increase it in 100%. I was like, oh, I definitely have a problem here. So that's how you can get an indication of this area is running out of capacity. Okay, so you start being able to look at what's happening with the user carrier traffic. Now, that one, I'm looking into the traffic. This one, I'm looking into the user satisfaction. So both things should be looked at together. So here I have a highly satisfied user, and the color, I don't know why it shows slightly different here, but this brown is supposed to be this burgundy. So this is my highly satisfied user. So everywhere my users are happy. 50% increase. I'm starting to have dissatisfied users in this area, and then very annoyed users on this area. And we trying to like make this more representative for a carrier. We try to rate at which point, by talking to users and doing research, at which point would you say, okay, I'm switching carriers? So usually this 25% here is like, that's it. That's my, I might be thinking of changing here. So you definitely don't want to let the network get to this point before you are addressing that, right? And then here's so this is a well-behaved scenario. Let's look at the realistic scenario. Everybody's happy. 50% of traffic increase from that original traffic. Now I start seeing that I have areas that, look on the real network, I already have people that have very poor quality right here. So if I can do this before this happens, I can address this. I can go there and say, okay, I might need a new site here. Okay, before you have that problem. So, and this is looking at the user satisfaction. Okay, so keep in mind when you're doing this traffic simulation, you're simulating the traffic, dropping the quality of the user, and that's why we represent this in satisfaction, because now you know how much traffic that the user is getting through rather than the network is passing through. Okay, so that's the traffic that makes the user happy. And here on the last one, it's just, so we created all this and we said, okay, we do all these predictions. We figure out how to predict where the network's going to break. But then you actually put the network in there, and now the network is working. And I want to prove my point. I want to check and make sure that what I'm predicting is really what's happening. So we created the cell phone app to do a type of a crowdsourcing, so you can install it in the phone of anybody. So you can install in the phone of all your subscribers if you want. But what we did, because we wanted to represent for our customers, and that's what it's important for carriers to do, not the transmission of the big packet. They need to represent their actual customers. So we created this Celplan mix, which what it is a mix of applications. So it simulates, instead of my having to get my phone and go there, now I want to watch a YouTube video, now I want to download an email. We pre-create that mix. This is a typical user of my network. This is the mix of applications you'll be using. And then that Celplan, it keeps sending that, replicating that behavior. And with that, you can create a heat map of user satisfaction. And that is mapped geographically. And the important thing here is that you have a client side, so you have the cell phone side, and then you have a server side. So you have the app on both the server and the client. So it's really simulating how your user is seeing that network, which just by doing a drive test, you honestly can't. So that's just the way we figure out how to test that. So to end here, my conclusion, things that you need to take from this, or we would like you to remember. First, wireless networks have been evaluated by drive test measurement OSS data, and those represent how the network is functioning, not how the user sees the network. So we developed this approach. It's to analyze user experience. And what's the big key of optimizing your network through user experience? You can minimize your CapEx and your OpEx. Why? Because you won't deploy sites that you don't need to deploy. So remember I said 4 out of every 5 sites usually you don't need. So you won't even put those sites there. But you also minimize OpEx. Why? Because if you deploy a site that you don't need, remember I gave the example of increasing the interference. Now you're going to have to be doing truck rolls to maintain that site and figure out that interference and do another drive test data, because now how come the interference got worse? So your OpEx also goes up. And honestly, if you just requested to deploy a site, would you 1 week later say like, oops, I made a mistake, let's turn that site off? No, now you're going to figure out a way to make that thing work because you requested it to be put there, right? Also, the third item, network performance varies with the application used. This, we cannot reinforce that enough. People do need to remember that. Speed test is not indicative of how good your network is, because that's not the size of packets that your users are using. User satisfaction should be considered to represent the user experience at each location at different times. It's one time of the day, he might be happy where he is. Other times of the day, he may not. And then just one way that we found to do this is with the cell phone app. So that way you can validate and adjust the results. So that's it. Trying to keep it short. There's a lot more. And if anybody's interested, we would be happy to share more on the subject. It's just, I was trying to cram everything into the time we had.
Okay, excellent. So I want to encourage you to post your questions for Cristine. Also, if you wish to have a copy of the slide, just request it from the Secretariat and we'll make it available. So, Cristine, thank you for that. I learned a lot from those slides as well. So, in terms of COVID-19, telcos have experienced that increase in broadband access, but we've also experienced less opportunities for recovering costs due to the pandemic. Can network optimization help telcos? You just spoke about CapEx, increasing, minimizing CapEx. Can you go a little bit about your justification for an optimized network and that investment?
Yes. So when you're looking at just the OSS data, that data, which is one of the, many of our customers that we started working with them, a lot of times they're looking to that OSS data and then they go like, oops, these sites are very full. So in this area, we need to put a new site. So they go there, they place the new site, and the new site, like I said, is immediately full. And then they go like, oh, that site was really needed. And their customers remain unhappy. Why? Because what they're looking at when they look at the OSS data is the OSS is carrying a lot of traffic. Now, is that customer traffic? Is that error correction? Is that overhead? You can't tell. The OSS cannot give you that information. So you might have just added a new site that cost you money, will have operational cost associated with it, but did not help the quality of your network at all. So your users on that area that needed more throughput still need more throughput. So it's very important that when you're looking into where should I add sites, you're adding sites for the right reasons. So you need to add sites because you really have too much customer demand, not because your quality is so bad that you're sending a bunch of error correction. That would be the wrong reason to add a new site. So, and that's why we've been reinforcing with people that, yes, it's great to look at OSS data to make sure your network is working, but not to determine where you should place new sites, because the OSS cannot tell you what data it's carrying. Does that respond to your question?
Yes, it does. So I want to stay a little bit on COVID, and you spoke a little bit about the trends that you are expecting, the shift from commercial users in an office space to the residential areas. How has the customer experience changed your response to network optimization, and how you are catering for this?
Yes, so that is another, I was going to say paradigm shift,
Yes.
because most people, when they design a network, right, as a carrier, and it's something that, of course, nobody could foresee this, but when you design, we always talk to the carriers, you have to know where your traffic is. You have to know where your user is going to be. So what carriers usually do is, where are the business districts, commercial areas, because that's where you expect people to be during the day, right? And then rush hours, they'll make sure the highways are covered, the areas that have more traffic flow for people to come back home. And then at night, you don't have as much network usage, and you do know that the most of the usage will be at residences, right? And a lot of times they might be cable, they not necessarily will be wireless. So you plan differently for the commercial and business districts in the residential areas. Well, so imagine you design your network for that. Then tomorrow you wake up and everybody has to work from home, and the kids are not going to school. So all that traffic that was completely in a different area of town during the day, it's on the only part of town that you have not designed for.
Yes.
So it's scary for a carrier, because how do you do this? How do you shift overnight? So it was, I would say, it really caught everyone by surprise. But I think the people that, came to work from a home office, they were also caught by surprise. And in a period of, a week and a half, 2 weeks, might be acceptable to scramble and get things up and running. But now it's no longer the first 2 weeks. Now the network should be plenty prepared to deal with all this extra traffic, with the different location of the traffic. So we just need to be, I think, more than ever aware that the traffic goes where the users go. So traffic, schools open up again, there's all those kids moving to traffic. Yes. Office opens up, you need to be aware that those shifts need to be addressed.
Yes, agreed. So I want to shift to Celplan a little bit. And can you give us your experience with COVID? How has COVID-19 affected Celplan? And then I want you to talk about the Caribbean region. What are you seeing? What shift have you seen with your customers in this region?
Okay, so Celplan, we're lucky, we're part of the essential industry. So on that effect, we kept working, right? So on that respect, everything was good. One big advantage that I think we had over other companies, and it made the transition easier for us, we already had a mentality that several of our employees worked from home offices. So for example, I have been working from a home office for 17 years. Ooh. And yes, so I have a true home office. It's attached to my house, and I have computers, printers. I have my office phone here. So it's a voice over IP phone. So it's transparent for my customers if I'm working from the home office or if I'm at the office, because they call my office number and it's here. So I think being prepared for that has helped us with this. I would say the area where we felt most, for me, it was not being able to be with my customers. I traveled a lot. I give training classes. We do a lot of consulting, and having the one-on-one with your customer, really knowing what they're going through, and knowing the different personalities and how you can explain something. You know, it's not the same when you're not there. You know, you miss that. So that was hard, I think, for most of us. And the other thing is that really our field guys, I mean, they deserve, they had to deal with the craziest, most unusual things. You know, you're out on the field and you need to go to, use the bathroom. Where?
Yeah.
Or I'm hungry, starving, there's nowhere to eat. So those guys really, they had to cope with the most unusual, everyday things that you think are not a problem. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's no food. So yes, so that was hard.
And one of the good things about it, telcos have remained working steadfast and true to provide that connectivity, telcos and the service providers. So, Cristine, I want to go into key network requirements for telcos to optimize customer service in terms of convenience and experience and stuff like that. Can you give us some of the key things that a telco need to focus on?
Okay, I think number one thing is, where are your users? So where are they located? That's very important, like we just discussed previously. The second thing is, I truly believe that telcos need to spend more time understanding their users. What are they using? What apps are they using? So they can look into the network not as, oh, this is the biggest packet size I can send and this is how fast I can send it, but rather like my users having a video conference. What is the average packet size of that? I need to make sure my network can deal with that. Voice over IP. So what are the needs of your customers? What are they truly using? You know, we used to say that, I always had this joke when I give training classes, people are terrified of teenagers because they were the traffic hogs of the network, watching their YouTube videos all the time and the real life gaming. But now we became those, right? Because
yes.
conference call, video calls, and so it's no, we can't blame the teenagers anymore, right? Yes. So that we need to know, what are your users using? And I think lastly, the networks have to understand that the traffic carried by the network just means that you're using all the resources you have on the network to carry something. It doesn't mean that that something you're carrying is the something you actually want to carry. So understood. Quality. It's very important.
Yes. So I wanted to spend some time on security. As networks get more and more sophisticated, there are more opportunities for cyber criminals. Are there any security issues in your view that telcos need to take into consideration when designing multi-channel networks?
Well, in terms of, I would say today there are two levels, I would say two things that should be looked at. One is the procedures that are put in place internally on the telco to guarantee that security, right? You want to guarantee that as an operator, nobody will be able to hijack your network, to create havoc on your network, or to take, you don't want anybody to be able to have access to do anything to their network the way your employees would, right? So that's one side of it. But the other side is you want to make sure that the information of these customers that are going on your network also has that. So I think more than just cybersecurity software that you can put on the customer end, on your end, is also having procedures in place that have a more holistic approach and look into security as a whole, not just, oh, my users are secure because I use that application or because I make them install this thing, or my networks. No, it is two pieces in this puzzle. And if you don't take that holistic approach, I think security could be an issue because people could just use another door to get in.
Yes. So staying on security and future trends, how do you see networks evolving to optimize customer engagement, especially with the Internet of Things and the millions of things that we have on the networks?
Yes, that's also, you just took a tip of my tongue.
Especially with teenagers.
Yes.
Everyone is using the same network now, especially when you work from home. It's not just you in an office on a VPN, it's your kids, it's your husband,
Yes.
everyone.
Well, one thing I would say that it's something I've been really helping my customers. So one of the segments I work closely with is the utility market. And more than ever, smart grid, Internet of Things. And so you can imagine traffic of controlling smart grid devices that will, in essence, determine if you have electricity or not, right? For the whole country.
Yes.
Now they're wirelessly controlled and they're being carried in many occasions and many times on the same network that's carrying the teenager video, yes. YouTube video. So how do you do this? So I think something that it was not as relevant before, 4G, 5G technologies, they have built-in possibilities of giving different priority for traffic, different security criteria. So traffic can be dealt with differently. But it was something that up until very recently, it wasn't really relevant because you just figured, hey, it's internet traffic, right? Any internet traffic is internet traffic. Like you said, no more. And especially with 5G permeating more and more, the wireless arena, and you wanting to put on the same network hundreds of sensors all throughout the city, thousands of sensors, or what we call the massive, right, critical communications, and utility data in there, and your teenagers and your home office workers, and the carriers will need to figure out ways to isolate the traffic, to encrypt data in different ways, and to not allow certain types of unauthorized access to be able to really permeate their structure as they provide their service. Because now you're not just talking about your internet going down, you're talking about potentially your power grid going down, or phone like 911 here in the United States, or police, fire department. You want those people to be able to keep their communication open.
Okay, yes. So, Chris, we have like about 6 minutes. I wanted you to share, if you can, at least one success story for network optimization.
Okay, I think the best one I can share is really when we started working with this. So we're marketing the solution now, but we had to come up with the solution about a year and a half ago, 2 years. And I think that was the most successful story. And that was what really opened our eye to the problem. One of our customers in the Middle East called us and they said, okay, we have this network. It's an LTE network. We have awesome revenue from the network. We have, lots of traffic. We have lots of customers. Everything, like we drove test the network many times. Everything signal is great. All the cells are full. but we keep getting user complaints. And they were already like, we don't know what to do anymore because we tested everything. And people are not happy, but we have money, we're carrying traffic, and we drive test and we have good signal. What's happening? So we started working with them, and that's when we first thought of, it was like, they're not looking at their customers. They're not happy because the traffic they're carrying is not the customer traffic. They have, too much interference. So we needed to help them. So at that time, we didn't have a tool yet to do that, but we had how we were going to solve this problem. And that's how we came up with the tool. So I'm happy to say that we were able to simulate their network and to show to them, you might need new sites just on this 2 location. This couple of sites that you put here, you actually have to take them down. They're just creating more problem for you. And with that, so we started with like a small area, and it worked out really well. And then since then, we have replicated that approach with other companies, like with operators in Brazil. And that's where we came up with that number. I was like, it seems like from every 5 sites they deploy, 1 should have been deployed. The other 4, it's probably they could get away with. So.
Okay, great. And that is so useful for telcos in the region. I have a question I must ask from Joan, because I know every parent on this forum is asking that same question. When using a PS4 game, hardly no one else has access to the network, to the internet. Why is this? And I want to add my own. What can be done?
Okay, what can be done is turn off the PS4, honestly.
And then get a screaming kid.
It is problem I have at my house too. It's not just a PS4, but there's other ones that have the same problem. So we don't have a PS4. Don't even know which one we have, but it's the same situation. My son actually asked me if I have eyes behind my back, because the other day I'm working and I was like, turn the video game off. And he was like, how do you know it was on? I said, because I can't work anymore. And what happens is so there is a way to use it. I don't think that the kids would be happy, but it is the live gaming. The PS4 has, remember that chart I showed with 1080p high definition video? So the PS4 is a high definition, I think the new ones are even 4P. They're high definition video. They are real-time gaming. So you're talking about kids that not just are talking, but they're watching the video, and that video has to be downloaded live because they're live playing with other players. So it's just way too much Goodput that they need to be able to be happy. You could play totally fine if you go off the real time play mode, but that's not what most kids want.
So we might see home network optimization in the future.
Yes, I think ideally what parents need is like a parent throttling device.
Yes. Okay. So we're coming to the end of it. Cristine, I want to give you an opportunity to share with us some thoughts, and also to talk a little bit about Celplan. I know you have some slides. Do you want to bring it up so that people can see what you guys do and how you can help?
Yes, I can do that. Let's see.
Okay. And for contact information for Cristine, it's at the end of the slide, as well as CANTO will share those slides. Once you request it, we'll make the slide available.
Okay. So I just really have like 2 or 3 slides. So our company's over 27 years working in the wireless industry. And one thing we're proud ourselves. So the reason we wanted to put this specific presentation together is that we really challenges. We really like to address things that other people don't. So when we started planning, 4G back with WiMAX, we started looking, I was like, okay, we can't plan these the same way we were planning 2G. Even 3G already had a little paradigm shift, but people still got away with planning 3G the same way they planned 2G. One of the reasons a lot of 3G networks had issues. But then when we got to 4G, we said, okay, you have to let go of what you know, and you need to start anew. So that's something that it's always been part of our philosophy. We are based in the United States, but we have other offices in South America. We have representatives in, we work across the globe. So I have many customers in the Caribbean region. It's one of my favorites to go visit. But we also have customers, in Europe and Africa. And it's very interesting to work worldwide like this, because you really get to understand how different areas of the world, the customers behave differently. The terrain is different. The network design requirements are different. So you can't just use a cookie cutter approach and try to put it everywhere. And a lot of times what we see, carriers rely too much on vendors, and vendors don't have an incentive, honestly, and I'm not putting the blame on them. I'm just saying they don't have an incentive, nor the time really, to dedicate a customized design for your network. So they don't have that time. So they kind of use a generic approach. Hey, out of capacity here, this site is full, put another site. This site is full, put another site. But that's not necessarily the best solution for you. So we really try to work with our customers on that. And then, so some of the things we do, we create a GIS database. We work with planning and optimization of networks. We have our own drive test equipment, so our own spectrum analyzer and scanner, technology scanner. In the Latin America, we do a lot of actual design and installation and commissioning. Not so much in the United States, just because the market's a little different. But we do a lot of drive test services, high-level consulting. And then we're really, if there's wireless on the market, we're there. Smart cities, airport, intelligent transportation. I myself work a lot with the smart energy and oil and gas and mining. So some of my biggest customers are oil companies and utility companies. And then we do a lot of also surveillance networks, video surveillance, so using wireless cameras and things like that. So that's, and then
Great.
Just one last slide. You can keep this as a reference, but on our YouTube channels, there's a lot of technical videos for webinars that we've done in the past, much longer than this one and much more technical, but talking about technology. So we really, and books we published that just with all the information that we learn, we try to share that with people as much as we can. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Cristine, and thank you for your time this morning. On Thursday, we take a break from CANTO Conversations. Remember to join us on Tuesday, August 4th, when we take a deep dive into 5G. Thank you. Remember that you can work from anywhere. Stay safe and stay connected with CANTO Conversations.
Thank you very much, Teresa.
Thank you so much, Cristine.